All right. So hey guys, welcome to one of the tech talks for the fall quarter. We have our guest David, who is a programmer at the BGC, and I'll just let him introduce himself and talk about just get started.
All right. Hello, everybody. I guess before we get started, I'd like to get to know my audience a little bit. So I know you guys are all interested in game dev of some kind. Is that right? Um, can I get like a show of hands of like programmers? Who here is a programmer? Who wants to be a game programmer? You can raise your hand there. Okay. How about artist? All right, we got some artists and designers. Any designers? Cool. All right, so we got a little bit of everyone, huh? Did I miss anything? You can type in chat if I missed what you want to do, but those are the big three, I think.
Anyone who does
Uh,
music,
I don't
audio.
think I don't think anyone wants to be a game QA, but I could be wrong about that.
Oh no.
Sometimes they use it as a stepping stone. I can talk about that, but so yeah. So myself, I'm a programmer. As is it Lilia?
Lelia.
Lelia. Okay, sorry about that. Lelia said. So I've been let's see, I went to UCSD and graduated in 2006. So my education may have looked a little bit different than yours. But even back then, my senior year, we had a games course where we created a game in one quarter. It had to be a networked multiplayer 3D game. We made like a space shooter thing. And we weren't allowed to use a game engine. So we did it all from scratch. And we did, I think it was all right for a bunch of college kids, but before then, I hadn't really considered my career to be going into games, but that kind of changed my perspective. Actually, working on one, I really enjoyed it, and that opened up that possibility in my mind that I might want to do that. So then, right out of college, I got hired at a game studio, a small game studio, and I worked there for 15 years. And I can talk more about that as well. And then more recently, I've been working at the Brain Game Center here at UCR, where I'm a senior programmer there. And the Brain Game Center is focused on the research aspect of mostly cognition. So like how the brain works and whether brain training works. I'm sure you've all seen like games that claim to improve your brain in some way if you play them. Well, we actually study that. And either result is fine with us as long as we're rigorous. So does this kind of game actually improve your results in certain areas of your life, or does it just help you with that one game? And so that's pretty interesting research. I think it's good, doing good for the world and helping people out. So I like that. So that's a very, very brief history. I'm sure you probably are pretty interested in the small game studio I worked for. But I think maybe opening up to Q&A might be better than me just telling my life story, because I'd like to know what you guys want to know about. And because I worked at a small studio, my hands were in everything. I mean, I'm not a good artist, but I know a bit about how game art works and the art pipeline and things like that. I also was very much a graphics programmer for a long time. So I saw the other end of that as well, where you have to get the art to actually work. So, and then game design as well. I think when you're at a small studio, everyone has their own ideas for design. So I did a bit of that as well. So yeah, go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question. I'd really like to just be, we can just be directed by what you guys are interested in. So. Weston, yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, so I'm currently taking my first computer graphics class right now, and the general consensus is that it's pretty difficult. And I would agree, it can be difficult sometimes. But I'm just curious, how marketable is that knowledge when looking for a job in game development?
All right, so that's actually a really interesting question, because I think I agree wholeheartedly that graphics programming is difficult, and it's only getting more difficult. And at a small studio, I actually had a really hard time keeping up. because there's always just, you have to be reading research papers that are state of the art and hoping that, you know, the guys at Unreal or Unity are writing good white papers so that you can copy what they did. Because it's at the point where trying to do it all yourself without doing, you know, studying others' research, you're just not going to get the results that people are expecting. So, but there's a sort of the other side of the coin there where a lot of studios are just using game engines now. And when you use a game engine, you often don't need very much low-level graphics programming. What you need is someone who's can use that engine to create shaders and get a look that you want within the framework of what some very, very smart graphics programmers at the engine side have done. So there's kind of two layers that you kind of think about graphics programming. There's the low level, like, how do we get the lighting to look realistic? How do we get the materials to be described properly? You know, how do we write those low level shaders in the shader pipeline? How do we efficiently render everything so you can have, you know, millions or even billions of polygons on screen? How does that interact with, now you have to do real-time ray tracing and a lot of this stuff? How does that work? How do you do real-time ray tracing in a way that's performant and works within the more traditional rasterized framework? How do you do a rasterized backup if they don't have ray tracing? Like, these are all questions that engine authors have to ask. And so if you want to market your ability to do that kind of thing, where it's like low-level graphics programming, you're at the cutting edge of research, you want to try new things to get things to look more realistic, you want to try new things to get things more performant, that's where you'd be applying to the big engines. So like, you know, I talked about Unreal, I talked about Unity. Every game, you know, the big publishers like EA, like they have their Frostbite engine, at least I think that's what they're using now, Frostbite 2. A lot of these publishers also have their own internal engines that they're using for specific types of games, and those need the graphics programmers to implement that low level stuff. But you can also be a graphics programmer at a shop that's actually making a game, and that shop is going to be using a game engine. And so there is still a graphics programmer work that you can do within the confines of, but we're using Unreal, right? Or we're using Unity or something like that. And you still need to know how to use that engine and how to use their built-in, you know, shader pipelines and things to get the look that you want out of that engine. Because, you know, you can imagine, like, I think you probably are aware of the tons and tons of games that all use the Unreal Engine now, or use the Unity engine now, and they have very vastly different looks to them. Like, you have ones that look cell shaded or hand drawn. You've got ones that look, you know, extremely realistic, and you've got everywhere in between. There's going to be some art style that the art director of your game is going to want consistent throughout your game. And it's the graphics programmer's job to provide the tooling and the shaders and all that to provide that specific look that you want. I can give an example if you want, from my own experience. So I worked, this was way back in 2008, so you may not have even heard of the game. But in 2008, I worked on a game called The Saboteur, which was an EA published game. And it took place in during World War II in Paris during the French Revolution. And it was kind of a GTA style game for PS3 and Xbox 360. And the idea was any Nazi occupied areas were in black and white, except there were splotches of red where like their flags and their paraphernalia were. And then when you liberated areas of the city, it turned to color. And so you had these same assets that were black and white or color or a mix. And you could even transition, like as you moved from an area that was, you know, resistance controlled to Nazi controlled, you'd get sort of this gradient where it would turn black and white or the other way around. And so this was the graphics programmer's jobs to achieve that look and to build into, you know, that engine the ability for the artist to specify these things and for it to look the way the art director wanted. So that's just one example of many, but that's out of my own experience. Did you have any follow-up questions about that, or?
That was a really, really solid answer. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. So who's next? They don't have to be as in-depth as Weston's answer there, or question, I mean.
Natalie, if you want, you can ask him like the standard questions that we already have.
Oh yeah, for sure. Just pull that up real quick. I guess we can answer this in two ways, but like describe what a normal day at your game dev job would look like. I guess also a BGC too, because I feel like those would be kind of different, but it'll be really interesting to know about. So like kind of like meetings and like, or what would you discuss? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely very different experiences working for a small private game company versus working at, university research. It's been quite a transition for myself, but I'm actually quite enjoying it at the BGC. So, so at my previous work, a typical day would be, you'd come in and you'd sort of get situated, and there'd be a morning. Every place calls it different, but we called it a Scrum meeting, even though Scrum means something very specific that we probably weren't following. But it was just a morning sort of stand up, gather around and just everyone talk about what they're going to work on. So it was an opportunity in the morning to, both talk about what you're working on that day. Did you accomplish what you wanted to accomplish the previous day? What issues you might be running into, any questions you might have for the group or for the managers, and then also get to know what your coworkers and your peers are working on, and you might want to know what they're working on so that you can account for that or maybe contribute or give your own ideas there. So that was the point of the morning meetings. I wouldn't say they were 100% successful. I'd say there were maybe 35 to 40% successful. I mean, who likes meetings in the morning? But you would find that a lot of people would just tune out and not pay attention. And I think that's pretty typical. So keeping the meeting short was usually a good idea, but sometimes they'd like drag on for an hour, and everyone there was bored and just waiting for it to end really and get back to their work. So that's definitely a balance. But then after that morning meeting, then it was just, you have your tasks that you said in the morning, what you wanted to accomplish that day. And the goal was to not leave until you finished that. And obviously things might change throughout the day, but, it was about setting up the expectations for yourself of what you wanted to get done. And then actually trying to accomplish that. And it was very much task-based rather than time-based. And that means exactly what you think it means. Staying late if necessary, which was often necessary. And the better you got at predicting what you'd actually be able to get done in a day, the earlier you might be able to leave. But also there was sort of this culture of, everyone else is staying. So if I leave, how's that going to make everyone else feel? Are they going to feel like I'm not a team player? And so it got to the point where the managers actually had to start kicking people out, because there's that feedback cycle of I'm staying because they're staying, but they're staying because I'm staying, and everyone's staying till 10, 11 p.m. and no one's having fun with it. And the work that's being done is not good. And so then the managers were like, well, maybe we can try kicking people out so to sort of cut that off. But your mileage may vary depending on the workplace culture varies a lot between different places. And I think getting to know, first of all, what culture are you looking for? And are you a fit into the culture of whatever game studio you're looking to work for? I think is very important. And recognizing early on if it doesn't match and seeing if there's alternatives. So work-life balance in the game industry is not great. And I'm not going to pull any punches there. And I think it really depends on the studio, but some studios will absolutely try to take advantage of your passion for making games in a lot of ways. And so I think that you have to be your own advocate, and you have to be willing to be the one who says, hey, it's late, I'm going home, right? And that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, a typical day is other than like that sort of mentality that's sort of always going on at a game studio like that, your typical day is just you try to get your tasks done, and you're sort of in your hope in an ideal day, you're kind of in your own zone and just getting your work done and not being bothered. And you just sort of work at what you're trying to get accomplished. As a lead programmer there, I did get interrupted a lot by others coming to me asking for help, and I had to manage that as well. Because if too many people came and asked for help and I was spending too much time helping them, then I wasn't getting my own tasks done. And because I was lead programmer, my tasks were often the more important tasks. And so how do you balance getting the important tasks done that you were assigned, but also making sure the others that are, on your team are able to get their tasks done as well? So that was something that was difficult to balance. Now at UCR, it's a very different situation. Like, first of all, I'm working from home, which has been a very big adjustment for me. It can be difficult to focus when you work from home, because like I'm literally sitting at the computer that I work at, and it's the same computer that I like play video games on and relax at night. And so it can actually feel weird in two ways. Like, it can be hard during the workday to say, oh, I'm working right now, I shouldn't have all this relaxation stuff that I do on my computer accessible, and I shouldn't be doing that a lot, and it shouldn't be distracting me too much from my work. But also, once the workday's over, it's hard to say, well, I'm not, when I worked at the studio, at least I would be in there and I could only do my work there. So when I was home, there was never the temptation, well, maybe I could get some more work done. Right. So when I'm working from home, it's really hard. I'm in the same room, I'm at the same computer, it's right there. I could just open up the project and keep working on it if I wanted to. And so sometimes I find myself late at night actually doing work when I don't really need to be. So it's a balance there. But in terms of culture, because it's research oriented, and it's not the pressure isn't there to make a profit and to be squeezing out of the employees every drop of productivity that they can have, right? It feels a lot different working for a university, because it's not that I can't, that I'm not getting my work done or that I can be lazy about it, but I don't feel that stress and that pressure as much, because things are much more open and relaxed, and we're just very professional, and we all, I don't know, it feels a lot different, and it's hard to describe why, but I'm quite enjoying that. So hopefully that answers that question. I was waiting for that question to take the opportunity to talk about those things. If anyone has follow-up questions about that, I'm happy to answer it. Yeah, Everly?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was wondering, what was it like working within the team at the game development company, apart from just doing your tasks and the meetings? Like,
well, what was it like working? So like, do you have like a specific like thing you're thinking about that you'd like me to talk about, or like?
Yes, I was wondering how you know what tasks you needed to do.
I see. Yeah. Well, everyone's got a boss, right? Unless you're the head of the studio. So generally, there's going to be people in charge of planning the project, and they have a lot of tooling that they use to try to plan out the development of the project. And these games can take 5 to 7 years sometimes, and they're meticulously planning stages and milestones. Milestones are very popular, where you say take a chunk of time, 1 month, maybe 2 months. Some milestones are even as short as 2 weeks. It really depends on the company, but you take a chunk of time and you split the project into those chunks, and you plan the entire, it's people's job, their entire job is planning the entire project and making sure that stays on track. And so they've got these toolings, basically spreadsheets with a nicer interface, that allow you to plan out, okay, we've got these milestones, and then within this milestone, here's what we need to accomplish. And that's what everyone's going to be working on, is getting every task for that milestone completed. And the task could be particular bug fixes, they could be particular feature implementations, they could be even just creation of certain documents, like design documents, things like that. And then so you as an employee, they're going to be going, okay, we have all these tasks that need to get done in the milestone. We're going to parcel that out to the different employees that are, you know, in the correct teams. They might even parcel them to teams, and then there's a team lead who then takes that list of tasks and figures out who on the team is most appropriate to get those done. It might be doing shuffling during the milestone, depending on how things go. But then ultimately, it's in that morning meeting, if you don't know what you're supposed to be working on, that guy's like, this is what you're supposed to be working on based on our milestone. So it might be extremely strict in that, okay, you're working on this, and that's what you're working on until you get it done. And then you're going to work on this, and then you're going to work on this, and you're just handed the tasks. And I think probably at other shops, like it might be a bit more like, okay, pick something that you want to do from the milestone list, get that done, and then pick something else. So it really depends on the shop, but that's generally how it's coming top down, right? You're not usually you're not in the space or opportunity, unless you're very high up, to go, today I want to work on this thing. Instead, it's today I've been told I'm working on this thing. So it's a, yeah, especially if you're I think if you're an artist, that is most true, where you're just told you're making this character model today, you're making this piece of landscape, you're making, you know, art for this item, you're making art for this UI. Like you're just told, hey, the game designers have said that there's going to be this art, or the art director has said there's going to be this art, and your job is to produce that art at a particular rate. And you can be creative within that as long as it matches the overall vision of the game, but that particular thing is what you're told to work on, and you make that.
I see.
Yeah. Does that kind of answer your question? Did you have follow-ups there?
Yes, I had a follow-up question, if that's okay.
Yep.
I was wondering, did your company work on multiple games at once, or was it just one big game and then like the entire company focused on that?
So my personal experience at my company will probably differ from what a lot of you will have. The company I worked for did contract work for bigger studios. And so the answer is yes, I did work on multiple games at once because we had multiple contracts going. And so, for example, the work I did on the Saboteur, I didn't work for EA. I worked for our small studio, and we had contract work with EA to help out in specific ways. And so in this case, EA just wanted to create the game for Xbox 360. They wanted to develop their game for Xbox 360, and they wanted PS3 experts to then co-develop it to make sure that what they're doing works on PS3 as well. Because PS3 was a very, very different piece of hardware than what a lot of people were used to working on. And I think that was probably a poor decision on Sony's part, but it is what it is. And so for PS4, it's actually PS4 and the the newer generations of consoles since PS4 have been basically computers, but the PS3 was very different. And so our shop specialized in PS3 development. And so we did a lot of that work where we did the PS3 version of the game that these other studios were developing on Xbox and PC exclusively. And so because of that, we had multiple games going at once often, and so sometimes I'd be switching between them. If you're at a studio that's working on the games directly and you're not doing contract work, then you're very likely you could be on the same game for 5 to 7 years. And that's the only thing you work on is that one game. And so I was lucky in that I have game credits in, I don't know the count, but it's 10 to 15 games. Because we would be hired near the end, like maybe a year and a half, 2 years before the game was done. And I'd be working on multiple games at once. And those games were games that were shipping. And so I shipped and shipped and shipped. I had colleagues, they worked like 7 years at Rockstar and the game didn't even ship and they had no credits. So, I mean, that's a terrible situation to be in. Like working on a game for 7 years and it doesn't even ship. So your mileage varies considerably depending on where you work. But I'd say typically you're on one game. Unless you go into a very specialized field. And I can tell you that this kind of contract work was very popular maybe 10 years ago, but studios are doing it in-house now. They're not really hiring out contracting companies like that anymore. So that might be a sort of a dead beast at this point. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
Okay. Anyone else have questions?
I guess I was kind of curious. It doesn't sound like it's a very typical, at least your first studio didn't sound like a typical 9 to 5 because you guys were staying till like 10 p.m., 11 p.m. I'm hoping they paid you for like overtime and stuff and like you got compensated because that sounds ridiculous that your managers had to make sure that you guys weren't actually staying that late.
So it depends on your job function. If there were people who were paid hourly, they had to request overtime. And so they would just leave after 8 hours. But most employees at a game studio are going to be salaried and exempt from overtime. So what that means is there's a salary threshold that they will meet. I think right now, I don't know exactly what it is. Right now, it's somewhere around the $55,000 to $60,000 a year mark. If you're making at least that much, this is in California. In other states, it's different. California is actually higher. But as long as you're getting paid that much and you're in a specific type of job function, which programmers easily fit into, unfortunately. I think artists do to an extent as well, and designers. But so in general, most people at a game studio are going to be salaried and they're going to be exempt from overtime, which means you are paid regardless of how many hours you work, you are paid the same amount, which means technically you could work fewer hours, but usually means you're working more hours and you're not getting extra compensation for that. But generally what you're going to be looking for is a salary that's already kind of accounting for the fact that you're going to be putting in a lot of time. But like I said, game studios do love to hire the people who are extremely passionate about games because they're willing to work that many hours for whatever number the company decides they're going to be paid. And they might put them at that floor just so they're just exempt. So definitely look out for whether a studio is taking advantage of you like that. I would definitely say, I think it may have gotten better recently. Like I know this is old news, but like EA was sued because of their horrible practices that they were doing to their game developers, were making them stay super late every day, these horrible crunch times that would last months and months and months, coming in weekends as well. And they were sued. And after that lawsuit, they won the lawsuit. And after that lawsuit, EA actually became one of the better places to work for because they're now paranoid about getting sued again. But other studios didn't learn that lesson. So, but I think slowly they may be. I'm not 100% sure about that. I think you probably see news coming out about like, oh, this game you love? Well, here's what the work environment was like, right? And so do you want to support that game still? Like, I think I think it's good that that's coming out because studios can't get away with it as much. But I think that you need to be your own advocate as well. And that might end up getting you, laid off. I'm gonna be honest. Like, if you aren't willing to put in that time from their perspective, then they don't want you and they've got a replacement in line already. But you may be able to find a place that you actually fit where either you're okay with putting in that time because you feel like it's productive for yourself, or they're okay with you not putting in that extra time. And I think that's kind of what you want to be hopefully looking for. But, if you're young and you're willing to put in that extra time, go for it. But you aren't compensated extra. Now, there are shipping bonuses usually. So if you stick around till the game ships and the game does well, you might get money coming in from that. But that, again, is going to be very specific to the studios, very specific to your job function, things like that. So they do very much want you to stay till the game ships. And so they'll incentivize that. and they'll very much de-incentivize you from quitting before the game ships, such as not being in the credits. So watch out for that. I'm not going to sugarcoat it because that's the reality. And that I mean, part of that is the reason why I left that previous studio. Is I felt like I wasn't being shown the appreciation I deserved. And, I tried standing up for myself in that area, and there was only so much my boss was willing to do for me. And so I ended up leaving. Any other questions?
Is the BGC nice to you?
BGC is very nice to me. Yes.
Is Aaron nice to you?
Aaron is very nice. Yeah, Aaron is a great boss, and I'm not just saying that because I currently work there. No, BGC, like I said, it's been a big adjustment because I am actually salaried exempt. Not all programmers at BGC are, but after you hit a certain like you hit that salary threshold, the UC system's going to be like, heck yeah, you're exempt now. But Aaron doesn't really take advantage of that. He just says, it's very, very much task based. As long as I'm getting my tasks done, it doesn't really matter to him. As long as I'm productive and getting my stuff done, I feel perfectly fine saying, oh, it's the end of the day, I'm not working anymore, right? And that's pretty much what everyone does at the BGC. So there isn't that cycle of wanting to feel like you're a team player, and so you want to at least stay as late. You don't want to be the first guy out at these studios. Like that's sort of the feeling you get, is if I'm the first one out, then that puts a target on my back. So you're kind of looking around waiting for someone else to be the first one out. And then, you'll notice that once that first guy leaves, suddenly 5 or 6 more people leave within 15 minutes. But it's a game of chicken. So it's not good. But at BGC, I've never felt that once. Much more relaxed, and the work-life balance is much better. Happy to take more questions.
Oh yeah. I have one, I guess. So this kind of like, what sort of like personal projects do you work on your free time? So it could be like just game dev, or just like something small, or like any hobbies on the side.
Yeah, so this is somewhat more recent for me, but I've been very into Sudoku the past 2 years. I know that might be funny, but I write software to support people who set Sudokus and Sudoku variants, and I also have a YouTube channel where I solve Sudokus, a live stream. Might amuse you a bit to hear that, but I'm really enjoying it. And the puzzles can be pretty fun. Like it's not just plunking numbers into a grid, especially with the variants for Sudoku. And so it's actually kind of an interesting programming challenge to support all these different variants for the puzzles, and to see what I can do to support people who are setting these puzzles. I've also set my own puzzles. And so I've been doing a lot of that. I also play video games, of course. Who doesn't, right? And I haven't been doing as much of it lately. I find my time is a bit stretched thin with all the other things I've taken on. But I do still watch Twitch and stuff to watch streamers play games and things like that too. So
You got any favorite streamers?
I don't really watch any of the big streamers. So
Oh.
I mean, I guess I used to watch a lot of Kriparian, and I haven't watched him in a while though. He only plays Hearthstone Battlegrounds now, and I'm not that interested in that game. But I like to pick smallish streamers with like 50 to 100 viewers, and then I become mod, and then I become friends with them. That's kind of my hobby. I stick with them for several years. So I've done that a couple times. I'm mod of several small Twitch streams. I don't know how it happens, but I participate in chat enough that the person ends up I become useful, and the person makes me mod. And then I hang out with them on Discord and stuff, and I come in and play games with them sometimes, things like that.
Do you think that I guess, so I know like some people, they're like, oh, I want to be a game dev, they have that passion, and then they go into the industry and it's almost like they no longer see it as a passion. Do you think that's ever changed for you? Like, you don't, not to say like you don't like doing it as much, but you see it more of a just a job rather than something that kind of drives you forward.
I think that's definitely, it happens to a lot of people, and I would sort of umbrella that under a larger concept of burnout. And I definitely burned out. Like I quit because I was so burned out that I stopped caring about anything. And I took 9 months unemployed just for myself. Like I had savings and I just lived off my savings for 9 months, and I just did nothing because I burned out, and I needed that time for myself to recuperate from that. I did a little bit of contract work just to get some income, but so luckily I got out of that rut and I found a job that I was able to work and not have those feelings at the BGC. And I was basically willing to I don't know the right way to put this, but if I was still willing to work at the crazy game studios, my income would be significantly higher, but I would hate my life. So I chose, essentially, I'd rather have happiness than more money. I learned that after a certain amount of money that you make, it doesn't make you happier. But there's that feeling of pursuit. Like if I'm not making more money this year than I did last year, then I'm failing, and it's really hard to get over that. But as long as you're comfortable with your salary, I would say do what you actually enjoy rather than trying to do what it takes to make more this year than you did last year, right? Keeping up with inflation is nice, but most jobs will let you do that. So if you find a job you love, stick with it. If you find that you're not loving it, you can look to see if there's other opportunities. I know a lot of people who worked in the game industry for 5 to 10 years, and then they're no longer in the game industry. They burnt out, and then now they're like, when I was 22 years old, I couldn't imagine working anywhere other than a game company, because how could I love what I do if it's not working on games, because games are my passion. 10 years later, they're like, I would like a 9-to-5 paycheck, and I don't care what I'm working on. I'll work for a bank, right? And then they work for the bank, and then they play video games at home, right, in their free time, or they might have small projects that are personal, right? And so they have that income, and then they work on games. I took a hybrid approach there, but because I do still very much, I am passionate about games, and I'm passionate about, I think that making games, especially certain kinds of games, is helping people much more than writing bank software or like trade, stock market trading, software, or some sort of random spreadsheet that's specialized to a specific industry, right? I feel like what I want to be working on, I want to feel like it's beneficial to society and that I'm helping people, and also allows me to have work-life balance. And I'm willing, as long as I'm comfortable, the salary is not the most important thing to me. And my dad had a hard time accepting that, but I think he finally has. But so I don't know, did I go off on a tangent, or did I actually answer your question? I don't remember.
Oh no, you answered it fine. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm glad to see that you managed to get back up and still like enjoy doing some game dev.
Yeah. And I think that liking the game you're working on is extremely important. Just the fact that you're working on games isn't enough. You need to like the game. And I think that the best games are made by people who actually like that kind of game and would want to play it themselves. But do keep in mind that you are going to be, making a game is not the same as playing a game, right? So being passionate about playing games is extremely different from being passionate about making games. They're almost completely separate. Like obviously there's overlap, because if you don't like games at all, you're not going to like either. But I think that there's a lot of people if you sort of draw a Venn diagram with people who like playing games and people who like making games, the overlap is much smaller than you may think. And even being a QA for a game, you're playing the same broken, unfinished game for years. And you're not playing it in a way that you would play it at home. You're playing it in a way that you're doing the same thing over and over again to make sure it still works, right? So I mean, it's a very different process. I also know people who don't like games but do like making games. Especially in graphics programming, you're probably going to encounter that a lot, where they're using their work on the game as an opportunity to improve graphics, and their favorite way to play the game is debug free camera mode, where you can just move the camera wherever you want and look at things. And that's their way of playing the game, right? They don't actually play the retail version because it restricts where you can go and what you can look at. And there's things like enemies shooting at you, so you can't just stare at the wall for 15 minutes. So there's definitely people like that where their passion is not games, their passion is graphics and making the best graphics possible. And games are one of the best vehicles for doing that. So that's what they work on. But if you don't like what you're doing, you're gonna burn out a lot faster, I would say. But also you want to make sure you're Donovan says that they would do that a lot in older games when growing up. Yeah, so maybe that's right up your alley. What was I saying? It doesn't matter. So hopefully that answered your question. But yeah, you want to avoid burnout even if you're passionate, is what I was going to say. You need some kind of work-life balance. You need to be sustainable in what you're doing. And that is, as much as it may seem like you're being forced into it, it is a personal choice to have that balance and to make sure you're not burning yourself out too quickly. You'd rather do game dev as a hobby rather than chase it as a career. I think that's that might be the case for a lot of people. I think every year it gets easier and easier to do game dev as a hobby because these game engines are getting so powerful and they're free now and all this stuff that, like, even 10 years ago, like, you couldn't get Unreal for free. Unity didn't exist. Maybe I'm even dating myself by thinking that's only 10 years ago, but I think it's very accessible. Like, back when I was in high school, I modded games because that's basically the only way you could be a hobbyist gamer, was taking an existing game and modding it, rather than trying to write one from scratch. That wouldn't have been possible for me. So I'm actually envious that you can you can just for free download some crazy good game engine and just pump out the concept that you want and do it as a hobby. Half-Life mods, yeah. I actually did some mods for StarCraft as well. All right. We still got some time if anyone has more questions. Someone wants me to drop my channel. I am not above promoting my YouTube channel. I will drop that in.
Drop it. Sudoku King.
That's my channel. I stream on Thursdays and Saturdays.
Wow. Oh, that's crazy. You have your own Discord server too?
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
All right.
Still have a few minutes left if anyone else still wants to ask David some more questions. Even just anything that not even like directly programming related. Like, we literally talked about his work life. So
we got two. Well, we haven't heard from Anthony yet, so let's go with Anthony first.
You mentioned in college, you made like a 3-player multiplayer game. Did you make any other games in college?
That was it. Like my first experience actually making games was that college course I took, where and this was at UC San Diego. So I don't know if Riverside has something similar where it was an actual course on where you would be in a group of 4 or 5 people and you'd make a game. You do have that. That's awesome. So I highly recommend that. That was sort of what made me appreciate what went into game dev and made me decide that I wanted to do it. Previous to that, actually, I wanted to work on compilers, which is about the opposite side of the spectrum you can be in terms of programming. But I took a compilers course and I took a game dev course, and you might imagine which one I enjoyed more. So and then Weston had a question as well.
Okay, so first off, I'm really surprised about how much we have in common with interest in game dev, compilers, and Sudoku. That just blows my mind. But on a separate note, I was just curious, are there any opportunities at the BGC for like internships for programmers or anything like that?
We do have intern programmers at the BGC who are students currently at UCR. Natalie is one of them. So there's programming interns, there's art interns, there's game design interns. So if I'm not responsible at all for any of that process, but if you wanted to apply to that and that interested you, I'm sure there's positions or something. I'm no recruiter for BGC, but that's definitely something you should look into.
I don't know. I feel like if you low-key just like search like BGC intern or like just their website, it's probably there somewhere. Yeah.
How'd you get the job, Natalie?
It was from like a previous art intern, Eve. Well, she doesn't go by Evie. Yvette. She goes by Yvette. I was like, wait.
Not Evie.
Not Evie. And then she like, yo, are you down? I was like, heck yeah. And then this interview, and I just clocked here, and then it's like, oh, cool. Look at this.
So Natalie's story actually reminds me of something I did want to bring up, and we only have a couple minutes, but it should only take a couple minutes, which is
speed run.
Every job I've ever gotten was through connections. Connections are extremely important. And when I got hired at the game studio, like I had just graduated. I actually had a very short job for one of my professors, which again, connections. And then that company failed. And right as he said, we don't have any money to pay you anymore, so we have to lay you off, I got a call the next day from a friend of mine who was in the same game dev course as me. And he said, my company's hiring. Do you want to apply? If you apply, you'll get the job, because I basically, my boss will hire anyone who's recommended by a current employee. Like my resume sucked, my interview sucked, but I still got hired anyway. And then I worked there for 15 years. So being friendly with people, getting those connections can serve you for the rest of your life. And then, after I quit that previous game studio job, I got hired at BGC. I mean, I did go through the interview process and I was selected as the candidate for the position, but a friend of mine from college worked at the BGC and he said, hey, we're hiring. I think you'd be a good fit. You should apply to it. And then he vouched for me as well. So companies love it when you have someone vouching for you, like someone who works there who says, I know this guy and he's good. So, or girl or anyone, like obviously I'm just using it as a gender neutral term. So connections are important. How do you get those connections? I got them naturally. They're just friends of mine from college. They're friends, they're colleagues that you make, you just meet along the way. If you're given the opportunity to speak to people, like to work with people at other places, seize that opportunity, be friendly with them. I'm sure they're perfectly great people. And if you make that connection and, you work together and that person appreciates your work and you did good work, then they'll remember you when something comes up. or if you reach out to them and say, hey, do you have anything? They'll remember you. They'll remember they liked working with you, and they'll vouch for you. So all about connections. Like if you're just blindly applying to places, like, yeah, that's a lottery. And that depends on how well you do on the interview, what your resume smells like, or whatever it is. But if you have the connection, like that's how I've gotten every one of my jobs. It almost feels like cheating. It might be cheating, but I think that's how most people get their jobs, to be honest. So yeah, I think what you're doing here, having this, being in this game dev club or whatever it is, I don't know exactly what you call yourselves, going into courses that are related to game dev and like, making friends there and enjoying that. One of your friends is going to go off and get a job somewhere, maybe through one of their connections. And then they're going to give you a call one day and say, hey, we're hiring. Like that's what happened to me. I don't know, maybe I'm really lucky, but yeah, Natalie's story checks out. She knew someone who worked there and they said, hey, you should work here too. Here's how you do that. So I know we're out of time, but I'm happy to go a little over if you need me to, but otherwise.
Yeah, if anyone has final questions for David, speak now. Otherwise, thank you so much, David, for your time here. We really appreciate you coming in and talking about your experience and stuff. And maybe, I don't know, hold future tech talks more often. It's really enlightening to have you here, actually.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if there was something specific you wanted me to prep for, I could definitely give you guys another talk. I don't think I want to like just tell my life story every time, but if there's something specific you guys wanted to talk about.
For sure. We'll definitely give you a heads up for more specifically like subjected tech talks.
Cool.
I'm gonna stop the recording.